And because it's 6:03, I'm going to get us started. I'm so glad you're all here from many different parts of the world. My name is Nell Hood. I'm the Educational Programs Manager for the Wild Sea Project, and we are so excited to have this as a resource for people who are wondering about how to take the work of adding biodiversity through native plants to their landscapes that they steward and put that on the scale of farms and gardens. And Nancy and John have been doing that for their whole lives. So we're really excited to have their knowledge and expertise here with us today. And I want to begin by saying that as we begin this program that will engage us in asking questions about plants and place, we want to recognize that the land we are leading this program from, that we here at Wild Sea Project are tied to in so many ways, is the ancestral Wabanaki territory we now call Maine. We recognize the inherent sovereignty of the tribes of the Wabanaki, the people of the Don, the Abenaki, Houlton Band of Maliseet Indians, Mi'kmaq Nation, Penobscot Nation, and Passamaquoddy tribe, and honor their relationships to the plants, animals, and other beings that have been threatened and displaced through settler colonialism. Sorry, that was a dissonance of feedback sound in that. The purpose of this acknowledgement is to allow this understanding to shape our work. Our work is dependent on reckoning with the historical and present-day violence of colonization. The exploitative values and practices of settler colonialism are directly responsible for the displacement of the important plants that form the foundation of our local food webs. We want to let this knowledge of the depth and the breadth of the legacy of displacement guide us today as we learn how to build relationships with place. From this understanding, we can ask ourselves, what does it mean to build and rebuild reciprocal relationships with people, plants, fungi, soil, water, and air? And where can we see that happening in our communities? Reestablishing resilient ecosystems in which all forms of life can thrive is an important action in deconstructing colonial legacy. We also want to recognize that while we are sharing these resources, these skills and this information did not start, nor should they end with us. We are sharing the guidance and knowledge from so many teachers acquired in both reciprocal and extractive ways. And we recognize the gift of this knowledge and hope that you will continue to share these learnings outside of this 1 hour we have together today. So now I'm excited to introduce the people we will be learning from today. Nancy and John Hayden. Nancy is a writer, farmer, artist, ecologist, and former environmental engineering professor. John has been working to design and implement agricultural systems with positive environmental and social outcomes for decades as a researcher, extension agent, university educator, international consultant, and practicing regenerative organic farmer. And together, they have spent their last quarter century first transforming their livestock grazing operation into an agro-ecological fruit farm, nursery, and pollinator sanctuary, and are now reproducing that model on a smaller scale in Mid-Coast Maine. So thank you so much for everyone being here today, and I'm going to hand it off to Nancy and John.
Thanks, Mel.
Thank you. Good. It's great to be here. And we're going to start a little bit about us, maybe. And let's see. And we've often called ourselves ecologists with a farming problem. And that problem is how to be profitable as well as good stewards of the land. And this is also sort of our final year at the Farm Between, which was our farm in Vermont in 2020. We're in one of our favorite hedges here. We've got high bush cranberry on the right. We've got some black cohosh, elderberry. We did a lot with black currants in Vermont. We've got a bee box there for bumblebees, and we look pretty sweaty and happy. So we started out in 1992. We bought this farm, old dairy farm. They'd gone out of business in the 80s. And we were new to Vermont. I just got a job at the University of Vermont, so I had a good off-farm job. And they'd been extracting hay here ever since they went out of business, and they weren't putting anything back. And so it was pretty much, I mean, it looks like the iconic Vermont dairy farm, but it's really a biological desert, if we want to put it that way.
All reed canary grass in the forefront, and the whole farm was a little bit wet-sided, so the reed canary grass had pretty much taken over everything.
So like a lot of young farmers, although we were in our mid-30s by then, starting out with livestock, it was a way to bring fertility back to the land. We always wanted to have animals. We had young children, so it was a lot of fun to have animals with them. And this was in the 90s, and there wasn't a lot of organic meats around, so we wanted to have good, wholesome food for the family. And we started a meat CSA. We did a lot with vegetables, organic vegetables, and we had a farm stand and sold at the farmers markets and all that kind of stuff too.
Oh yeah, I just want to say something about so this is a picture of a typical small farm, and we're thinking about our ecological footprint and being ecologically sound as well as trying to be profitable. So this was in the days we were certified organic, and Biotella was a plastic type material made from cornstarch and some other unknowns that was okay to use for a few years. In between, we had our peas and the I think this pointer's working. I'm gonna assume it's working. Over here, we had our winter rye cover crop. So we were doing all this stuff, and we were working really hard. We had outlets. We had our internet's. Hopefully, you can still hear us. Nell, if you're not seeing us, you can take over. But we're still
You're good.
good.
Yeah.
We just got to
Cutting in and out a little bit, but just keep rolling.
All right, we'll keep rolling. So yeah, so this is kind of like the formula for organic farm. We had the greenhouse, we had all stuff, and we were not doing all that well. Some years we would make a little money, but it was a good thing. I was working 80 hours a week because I was probably making about $3 an hour in a good year. So wasn't that satisfying.
So we had started transitioning a little bit into higher value crops like fruits and moving in that direction. And then we had some flooding events on the farm, took out a field of potatoes and corn, and that really motivated us to do the total switch over to perennial fruits and high value added products like that.
This was the second flood of this year. That was 2011, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we got flooded twice, and that was really an epiphany to us that the business as usual wasn't going to keep working. We have to really change what we're doing.
So we transitioned to the goal was to transition to a profitable perennial polyculture with the focus on organic fruits. And because of this, we really needed to add more native plants for ecological services, pollinator services, as well as pest management kind of activities. We also were using a lot of the native plants as our fruit products like elderberry, aronia, and some of those types of things that we could find markets for. We incorporated hedgerows and windbreaks. We were kind of lucky. We're in the beginning of all the breweries and cideries and wineries that were going in Vermont. So we had a lot of wholesale markets. We found wholesale markets, and then we also did a lot of value added. Perennial fruit farm for probably the last 10 years that we were in Vermont on our farm, 29 years. We're growing a lot of, we put in an apple orchard, we had some different types of fruits like honeyberries, hascaps up there, and we had tart cherries. John's holding up some red currants. We did black currants. Those were, we could grow those in Vermont. So we were selling wholesale retail at the farm markets. We were making snow cones, and for a while we joked that the snow cones were floating the farm because we really were making a lot of money at the farmers markets on that.
Yeah, we started making these organic syrups here. So we had like strawberry rhubarb, raspberry apple cider, black currant, elderberry ginger. once we put up a sign for organic snow cones, then the parents felt great about sending their kids over to get
Even though
their sugary treats.
we were doing hand cranked shaved ice. So it was really a lot of fun for a while. And we were making these ciders. We were kind of not into the pushing sugar. So we were looking at like apple cider that we would blend with fruit that had no sugar added. And those were very popular. And we also had a fruit nursery, edible landscape plants and shrubs. I left the university, and this was really allowed us to me not working outside the farm. So that was really good. And it was really felt really good to help people pick fruits for their gardens and native pollinator plants and that type of thing.
So yeah, we really wanted people to help them become self-reliant and self-sufficient. So it was really fun to set them up. And we borrowed this term. I don't know if you can see my pointer again, but how are you bringing nature home? So that was really our point, is try to get people to reconnect with nature. And we borrowed that from Doug Tallamy, who's got some great books about insects and plant interactions and the importance of native plants.
And then we wrote a book, came out in 2019, called Farming on the Wild Side. And it's really about growing fruit, perennial plants, biodiversity, and resilience. And it has a lot of our, some of the challenges that we faced, some ideas that we used on the farm, a little bit of our philosophy, and a little bit of how to. So it had kind of a little bit for everybody. So people ask, well, what is farming on the wild side? And I like to start with this slide from 1992 when we bought the farm, and then this slide when we in the later years. And so if you look at this, the old ditch stream that was running through the reed canary grass now has things like silver maple, trees came in, silver maple, birch, and then willows in here. And then we planted the high bush cranberry, 9-bark, witch hazels, American plums, just a whole 3 different types of dogwoods, just a whole menagerie of native shrubs in here. And it turned out to be really great, because when we had the nursery, we could show people what a high bush cranberry looked like when it's mature, and a 9-bark, and all the different types of native plants. So when they're trying to figure out landscaping for their property, then they would be able to look at it. We also put in an orchard in our lawn over here, and a lot of fruit bushes and berry bushes. So
Part of our Kill Your Lawn program.
and if we look at it from above, we see this was kind of fairly long time ago, 2015, 16, spring. You can see here's the farm and most of our production area in here. It goes up along the fence row here, and we put in a apple orchard back here. Here's the riparian zone hedgerow that we've created along the stream. We have some management intensive grazing. We still had our horses there. You can see maybe the willow labyrinth that we tried to get going. And here's some elderberry plantings and a whole bunch of other stuff going on in here.
Hey, Nell, just a quick question. Are you seeing our pointer?
We are seeing the pointer. Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, good.
So yeah, so this was the stream that was a ditch in the very early years, and the farmer we bought the place from us thought, yeah, you better keep that ditch clean or you're gonna be sorry. And we ditched it one year, and it ran like chocolate milk, soil erosion, and we said we're never doing that again. So for 30 years we didn't ditch it, and it grew up into this beautiful habitat for birds and insects and native plants, and we never had an issue with water coming from there. The Lamoille River is down here at the bottom of the screen, and that's where our flooding would come from. So, but what I like about this picture is the contrast between our farm here and then the farm across the road, which was soybeans. This is in the spring, so you can see all that exposed soil, prone to flooding, prone wind erosion, just drying up, caking. Really, it's just such a contrast in life versus this monoculture that had only one species in it.
So as fruit farmers, we're going to be, all of our fruit required pollinators in order to get fruit. So they really had a special place for us, especially the native bees like bumblebees. And here's a leafcutter bee and just a whole bunch of other bees that would do our pollinating for us. When I would go out on a drizzly cold May morning, and I would see the bumblebees all working the black currants and the honeyberries and the gooseberries, and they were really doing all the work for us. And we did have honeybees, but then that kind of weather, they would be inside. But we did have them at different times for honey and some pollination services, especially like with apples and things like that. But here's a good example of an early season pollen source. Willows make a great native plants, especially if you have sort of wet areas. They really host of other types of butterfly larvae, as well as other insects that are going to be great for for the birds and other types of things as well. So willows have always been a special part of our native plantings. So when we think about these pollinators, we want to think, what can we do for them, as well as beneficial insects on the farm. No pesticides. We wanted to plant pollinator-friendly plants that provided season-long resources. So this is where those shrubs, so many of these native shrubs come in, and really looking at their when they flower and that type of thing to see, are we getting coverage for different times of the season. We also thought a lot about nesting and overwintering habitat for bumblebees and other types of bees. And then for managing the farm, we really wanted to time the mowings of our fields and ditches, because there's a lot of insects and bee resources that are there until October. So we didn't want to do that too early.
Yeah, pretty much if you had to mow, we would wait until the fall. But mostly we found out that not mowing an old field, it turns into a beautiful meadow. And then everybody says, yeah, what about the trees coming in? Well, we didn't mow that one field for like 8 years. And then one time we just had you and Sarah walk through it and pull the trees.
Yeah, some of the native,
the red maple
honeysuckles,
and honeysuckles and some invasives that were coming in, but could be done by hand. So it was really a better way to manage that from the ecological point of view.
Now in Maine, there's a lot more invasives than we were that we worried about. But one of the things that I think that we did, if you remember that one picture, we had we mowed a pollinator path around that meadow, and that was a great way for keeping a lot of, like, blackberries were starting to come in on the edges, and you could really mow that and kind of keep them from jumping over into other parts of the meadow. So that kind of worked for blackberries.
So a lot of our farm was dedicated to these wild spaces, and we wanted to be no pesticides. We didn't spray anything. And to do that, you can't just not do anything. You have to be proactive. So we set aside a lot of wild spaces to act as insectaries. These are places where insects would actually build up, both pests and beneficials. And the native plants are great for that, because a lot of these things have co-evolved with them. And just in this picture, you can see like Joe Pye weed and the flat top aster, New England aster, and the jewel weed, touch me not, goldenrod. So just by leaving things unmanaged, we got a lot of benefits from them. And so when I talk about pests, we try to get that mentality out of our heads that they're pests. They're just co-inhabitants of the farm, and we want to keep their levels at a manageable level. So we want to share a little bit with them, because if you try to eradicate pests, you're going to be on this roller coaster ride. So keeping aphid population in the hedgerow is great because it's going to keep these wasps alive. And these wasps are laying their eggs in the aphids, and the larvae are hatching and eating the aphid from the inside out and popping out of the back as adults after they pupate. And just like a sci-fi movie. So these wasps, they need some habitat. They need nectar, floral nectar for their energy, and they need aphids to reproduce. So we want aphids. We don't want to wipe them out. So I was an agricultural extension agent specializing in pest management in Michigan, and I espoused this philosophy for a long time about looking at this table here where you have population density as it goes up over time. So you'll get a typical curve like this, then you'll have an outbreak where the pest gets above your economic injury level, and you should take action. And then when you take action, it goes down below, and then it takes a little while to come back, and then it comes back again. And I like this graph because it shows it comes back harder, and then it comes back down because you've used an insecticide or something, and you've wiped out the non-target insects that are keeping things under control. So that is not what our pest management philosophy was. Our pest management philosophy was keep the pests around. We like seeing them. So, but we wanted them at a low level down here. Give up 5-10% of your crop in a bad year, and don't take any action. And we saved a lot of time and expense, and I think environmental degradation by not using any pesticides during our time there. And then also like softening our view about pests. So this is Japanese beetle, and we hear people say, you mentioned that, people are like, I hate Japanese beetles. And how can you love nature and love being connected to nature and then hate one aspect of it? So I couldn't try not to get around those feelings. So our kids said, oh, look, they're red and green. They look like Christmas beetles. And, they put a positive spin on them. So we put, we had some wet spaces on our farm, and we would put things like the wetland rose in there that happened to bloom right about the time the Japanese beetles were coming out, and they would act like a trap crop to keep them off our other things like our plum trees and things that we were going to be harvesting from. And the other thing that was cool, see these little 2 dots on the thorax of the beetle? Those are from a parasitic fly that'll lays those eggs, and then those will hatch and burrow in there, and then again eat the beetle from the inside out. So by not spraying and things like that, we're keeping the kindred flies working for us, working with us.
The only time the Japanese beetles were a little bit troublesome was in some of the tree nursery stock, because they're little trees and stuff like that. But we were able to just shake them. I mean, in that case, they're small trees, so we could just shake them off and do something like that. But surprisingly, even that was not that big of a problem, because they had plenty of other things. The evening primrose, I don't know if you have that growing around, they love that. So we would have that in some of the waste spaces as well. And that we just had them, the Japanese beetles just had their own little territories.
Yeah, so on our nursery plants, it was mostly just aesthetic damage. People don't like to see little shot holes on their leaves, but we would always tell them, well, if nothing's eating it, you don't have an ecosystem. So it's, look at that as you're adding to the ecosystem. And then, so as a fruit grower, the cedar waxwing is another one that just like gets your hackles up, right? But because they love to eat berries, and they'll send scouts out, and scouts will find the berries and then call all the rest of the flock and come clean.
Wipe you out.
Yeah, if you're not paying attention. But the great thing about them also is when they are nesting and have fledglings, they are collecting protein in the form of insects to feed to their fledglings. So having hedgerows and nests and things like that, they were working with us, and we actually figured out to welcome them by being proactive with nets. So you can't just not do anything. It's still, using no pesticides is still management intensive. It's not just leave everything alone. You have to think about how you're interacting with these organisms. So, using nets these are honeyberries. I think you can see the blue in here, they're ripe. These are, I don't know if you people are familiar with them, but they're delicious little teardrop shaped berries, similar like a blueberry raspberry cross. And they're the first fruit of the season, so the birds go nuts on them. So you have to get your nets up before they turn blue, because if the birds get a taste of them, then they're going to try to find ways through your nets.
I want to just jump in for a minute and draw your attention to this hedgerow behind the greenhouses, because I didn't have a good picture of it later, but now I see it's actually a pretty good picture. That is our hazelburt, which I'm going to talk about later. So just see, they're quite tall, and they make a really great hedge.
Yeah, not the trees behind them, but the front row.
Yeah.
And then so we wanted to transition to fruit, but how do you do that since fruit takes, at least 3 years before it's going to start bearing? So we did a lot of intercropping. So in this picture, you can see some sugar snap peas, which are always a great crop for selling and getting a good price. And when they get nice and fat, you can pick them at, $60 an hour or something. So they're a great crop. Here's our young blueberries growing. And here, these are beach plums back here, which are also helping to protect the blueberries from wind, especially in the winter. We were up in the mountains of northern Vermont in Jeffersonville, and we could hit 40 below with winds, and that can be tough on young blueberries.
I want to show again draw your attention to these were sheet mulched, and with the wood shavings on top, the acidic wood shavings on the blueberries. Over here, we've got some landscape fabric for keeping the weeds down over there.
And then again, more alley cropping. This was that perennial orchard. These are apples on 20-foot centers, and they're caged for deer. And then in between, we had things. This is alder here. And then within the row, so you had all this space, 20 feet. What are you going to do until those apples get big? So we started doing more alley cropping. This is sea kale and sunchokes, and you have to find the right people who want to buy those. Sea kale is fantastic, and I think sunchokes are also. But you have to educate chefs and people about how to use them and why they should be buying them from you. Are we taking over here?
I don't know, but I can talk about
Yeah.
this because this was our potato field and cornfield during that flood. And that was, I think that this fall we went in and planted elderberries and aronia, and then a few years later saw the fruits of our labor. So these guys can handle occasional flooding, elderberry and aronia, which this field is prone to flooding. It can also handle heavier soils. It's not elderberry especially is not drought tolerant, but like I said, this was a wetter field, so that worked out great.
And these are our kind of our all-star native crops. We found great markets for them and really love them, growing them. They're profitable and in demand.
No, I think this is you.
Oh, okay. We divided it up, and now we forgot how we were going to do it. So we just color commentary from both of us. So this is no-till establishment, elderberries. This is how we would do it. No dig, no plowing. The sod is a great source of organic matter for the plants once it starts decomposing. We did use a lot of plastic landscape fabric, and that hurts a little bit because we don't like the fossil fuel aspects, or even the degrading plastic in the soils is a possibility. But for larger scale, we found this to be the most economically viable way to do it. So, we had to make some compromises to be profitable. And then this was one of them. We could reuse this landscape fabric for several years, many years. 8 years
At least.
at least. And we brought some here to Maine with us too, so we're still using it. But this is how we would just dig a hole and put the plants in it, and they would thrive.
One thing about this plastic though is to avoid the fraying on the edges, you want to cut it with a propane torch so it seals the edges, and that's going to prevent a lot of those plastics from getting away from you.
And the other caveat is in the wintertime, it becomes a party place for voles, and voles like to chew the cambium of woody trees. Like a multi-stem thing like this, elderberry, it's no big deal. But if you tried to do this with apples, you would have problems. You would have to pull it up in the fall and lay it back down in the spring, or just use it for the establishment year, because they would get chewed by voles. So this is what it looks like when you pull it back up after a year. And here's Sarah applying some composted manure to elderberries. So you can pull it, unzip it from the middle, apply stuff and then zip it back up.
For people that aren't familiar with it, you do use these like 6-inch, 5-inch staples
Yes.
that you put in metal staples. And again, you can reuse all those again.
So we're trying to give you ideas for planting for yourself. You can take this and go with it or try some other things, but this is how we did it. So here's the first year of Aronia on the left. And then we wanted to do another, well, the second year is on the right. So we planted that one first and had black plastic. And then in the second year, we took the plastic off and just went with mulch. And then the first year, it's got plastic on the left there. I don't know if I said that right, but it's first and second year. And this is what it would look like after a few years. So, here, the Aronia and elderberry they're doing a lot of shading. So there's not going to be a huge competition from the weeds. And then we would come in and mow maybe, once or twice, two or three times in a year. And we do mow and blow. So we'd start at the center and move everything under the plant. So it would act like a mulch. And,
Nutrients
there's a lot of good nitrogen and stuff in those. There's a lot of clover and stuff there. So blowing that into the plants is going to be helping you. And then on a smaller scale, this was a demo we did for our nursery showing people how to plant blueberries. So you can also use cardboard. Cardboard is fantastic. If I've done a lot of dumpster diving in my days, getting truckloads of cardboard out of dumpsters. We prefer the food grade cardboard, especially like from organic food. So the co-ops are great for that. And just with only black ink. Make sure it's soy-based ink and not waxed cardboard, just plain brown cardboard. And just dig a hole, put your amendments around your plant, compost or whatever you're using, and then put the cardboard, and then just cover it with something to keep the cardboard from blowing around. So whatever organic matter you have, those are nice softwood wood chips, which are good for blueberries. They have the right mycorrhizal fungi that
Acidic.
and they're also acidic.
So I thought maybe we'd talk a little bit about some of our favorite native shrubs. And like we've been saying, we've used it for biodiversity, for for pollination services, and aesthetics,
and maybe even crops. So we're just trying to imagine how we could use these as crops. This one maybe the 9-bark taking cuttings and giving them to a florist for cut stems.
Yeah, so 9-barks, it's just a beautiful, we've got it sort of lining this edge of our drive kind of as a screen. This was in Maine as a screen, but we had it on the farm as well. Here's Potentia, nice. These are great for, your gardens as well, because this one flowers all the time, all summer. Arrowwood viburnum is another, a lot of the viburnums, high bush cranberry and maple leaf viburnum, and there's a lot of different viburnums that are great, flowering at different times, so you can have the pollination services, attracting insects, which are great for birds, feeding on those insects and things like that. So here's the hazelbird that I mentioned. Really, this is a cross between American hazelnut and English filbert, and it really gives a bigger nut. And we were using this on the farm, hoping to use this as a crop for selling and that type of thing. Makes a fantastic hedge, though, and a screen to the neighbors, where our greenhouses, the back of our greenhouses and stuff like that. So it was really wonderful. You got to get them before the squirrels do. That's the main thing.
And then the native counterpart of this here in Maine would be the beaked hazel. And it still makes a nut, but it's pretty small. I don't see how that one would be economically viable, but viable for all the other reasons.
And people really like these at the nursery because they could use it as a hedge or a screen from their neighbors or traffic type of thing. Mountain ash. Now this is really, I guess you'd call it a small tree and not a shrub, but it can be kind of shrubby. Great native plant for the birds. We were interested in it again as maybe making some kind of exotic type syrup, or somebody using it in their brewery or whatever, although we never it never happened, but we like these anyway. They're beautiful plant to have around your house. This is American plum. We had this growing like a little thicket of this, and amazing bee attractant early on. You see there's not a lot of other things blooming at this point. This would be loaded with honeybees and a lot of different types of native bees, small native bees. And it made some really great, some years we had some really great crops. What do I call that? Great harvest. Yeah, yield. And used it for this. We sold quite a bit of these to different kind of cideries or breweries and things like that.
Yeah, we made a plum syrup with it also. That's
Yeah.
good. If you stick your head in those flowering plants at that time of year, it's just amazing. Just like this symphony of bees all around you.
And you can smell it too. It
Yeah.
smells, it's very faint, but when you stick your head in, you really get a great smell. So
Good place to hang out. They're so busy foraging too, they're not going to sting you.
as we've mentioned, high bush cranberry, again, one of our favorites, just a beautiful shrub for landscaping, but also gets very tall, 10 to 12 feet, and spreads out slowly. So it's not like an invasive type thing, but it can really be a nice hedge or screen. And it's also providing lots of pollination services and insectary. And this is what it looks like in the winter. It's so beautiful. We thought maybe you tried to make a jam out of it once.
I mixed it with apple cider.
Yeah.
So it's
Nah.
basically it tastes like cat pee.
When you eat it fresh, when you eat it sort of fresh like this in the winter.
I tried to dilute it with apple cider, that didn't work. So it's edible, but not that palatable. Even the birds don't like it though either. They won't eat it until the beginning
until
of
they come back. Those cedar waxwings come back in the spring, and you could have something like this one morning, and you come back and they've gone through and they've eaten every single one of those berries because they're starving. So it's a great for that too.
So just to sum up our time at the farm between in Vermont, we were really striving to make this robust, resilient farm ecosystem. We wanted to fill this place with life. You know, we showed you in 1992 it was pretty much a desert and nothing going there. And we felt like we accomplished our goal there. We had biodiversity of crops and native plants. We had a complex food web. We were able to make a living off of it our last 7 years or so. We felt really good about it. There's the whole story in our book and a lot more information about different things like hugelkulturs and, you know, interplanting and stuff like that. So then we were looking for a new adventure. So we came here to Maine and we moved to Waldoboro on Dutch Neck, and we bought this house, which was kind of run down and it was a foreclosure. It looks kind of nice from the outside. The inside was not that nice. And we spent a year fixing that up. But this is what it looked like when we bought it. And you can see we're starting to map out the contour lines and places where we want to keep a drive or make a terrace on here. And we looked out in the back, and we didn't even know that what the topography was because it was full of invasive. So we have every kind of invasive. And we were a little bit pat about invasives when we lived in Vermont. Oh, they're okay. They're not so hard. You just got to. Here, it's a real deal. We have, Japanese knotweed and bayberry, and I mean, just
Barberry, Japanese
the
barberry,
barberry,
multifloral rose, it's just nonstop. The bittersweet
will drive you nuts. So this is
John's scything here. Yeah. He's scything the Japanese knotweed, which we realized, oh, this is flat down here.
Yeah, we can do something here. Let's use this land. And then, so the soil had been scraped off to make that flat area for the house. So there was no topsoil. And I had never, that was beautiful alluvial soil in Vermont, river bank soil, and it was just gorgeous. So this was like farming on Mars, you can see all the stones that just pulled out in this one little area here, trying to make a row. And so yeah, we had our work cut out for us. The water was just, this is a slope, so it was just sheet draining here, it wasn't soaking in. So we had to do some put some electrical lines, conduit out to the garage and some other places. So we rented a ditcher. And we said, well, while we have the ditcher, let's run it on the contour lines so you can at least have some place for the water to slow down and start soaking in. And then the magic of compost and wood chips. We know what to do with that. And there was no organic matter in the soil, and no phosphorus, no nitrogen. It was just depleted. So this is where we started. We used the cardboard in this case. We found a great cardboard dumpster site. I can't tell you where it is because then you'd probably all beat me to it. So we'll keep that secret. But it's a co-op in Damascata. And so the soil's acidic, so we laying down lime, and then we're putting the cardboard down. Then we had some manure from a horse farm next door, which was great. And then we put some other stuff. There's this dark stuff is regular compost that we bought in compost, which hurt our wallet.
Couple of years.
Because we currently in Vermont, we were always making giant windrows of compost. And we found some leaves people were trying to get rid of. So yeah, we'll take them. Very much an organic matter scavenger, and laid those on top. And then we turned that under with just a spading fork and planted peas. So these are some field peas, a gray dwarf variety that I had from making shoots. I had extra seed. And this is what it looks like right now. Nancy just took this picture today, actually. So we're reclaiming small sections over time, but we wanted to show you how we reclaim this section. And so this I'm going to mow after they go to seed and plant our garlic there this fall. And the seed peas will actually grow back up again after you mow it. So we'll get double cover crop out of this, and then they'll die when it gets really cold and have a nice cover crop for our garlic. And
So we spent a lot beefing up our hedgerows with more favorites, right? Right here, we've got a alternate but pagoda dogwood. We've got sumac, we've got a cherry tree behind, but so in between these, we added serviceberry, nannyberry, red osier, and silky dogwoods. We put in buttonbush, snowberry, winterberry across the drive, and witch hazel, and all the other that I've previously mentioned, high bush cranberries and all those, and really bringing diversity to this invasive stronghold, and really trying to make it into an amazing ecosystem.
yeah, we were so thankful we had a nursery because we were able to haul
Yeah.
plants here from our nursery. Didn't have to buy them. That would have been very expensive. And of course, we brought our favorites, the elderberries, aronia, and beach plums. Gotten to have them going now. And this was that invasive area. I just kind of show you our strategy. So when you're trying to clear invasives, if you try to clear it all and you can't keep up with it, it gets very discouraging. So we start with a small area, cleared it, made the terraces, planted some veggies in there. This is the next area we're killing now with some of our recycled black plastic from Vermont. This area here, I really need to get in and scythe. This is like
Japanese.
This is all Japanese knotweed, but this is how the whole thing looked before. So we're slowly working our way. But if you bite off more than you can chew and it grows back on you, you get discouraged. So it's nice to baby steps. And then in the front here, these are some potatoes and rhubarb, honeyberries here. So we're starting to fill this thing up with life, other life. And I think we have some before and after pictures. So this was before, and then here's a few years later. So this is, of course, I see kale here. I just love that plant. And then step back a little bit and more into the wilder part. We've got raspberries and grapes and rhubarb and then different fruit trees. We still like comfrey a lot. It's just loaded with bumblebees all the time. It's in flower, and we really like it. And then I'll come through with the scythe and use it as a mulch around the trees once the flowering's done, or I'll do half at one time because they'll grow back and reflower if you do that. So we'll just do it in sections so that we have continuous flowering. And then here's our orchard that we started. These are cherries and plums, and this is what it looks like now. So we have commercial cultivar plums as well as American plums for pollination services, because plums are notoriously hard to cross-pollinate, but the American plums, if you can get them to bloom at the same time as your commercial varieties, they're great cross-pollinators. And asparagus, all kinds of stuff filling in there.
This is that fall we moved in, we killed our lawn, and we're still managing what we want in there, but
just
we
trying
got a lot of life in there now, but it's not all organized.
now we're gonna start moving stuff around.
And
Yeah.
as we'll end with one of our favorites, silky dogwood.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. You are so clearly such a wealth of knowledge, and like I just love how everything is useful. Everything is, nothing leaves, nothing goes. And I think there's some questions. So if people want to put questions in the Q&A section, I can start reading them, or I can have people, I can like turn people's, I'll just read them. But I think that something that if you have, I would love to start by just thinking about, I know the question of sourcing material is a big one for a lot of people, especially people who are trying to do this on the scale. And you were saying that you have a nursery, but like how you were getting, how were you sourcing material before you had a nursery? Or
Yeah, so I mean, one of the great things about having a nursery is you can propagate your own plants. A lot of things we would make hardwood cuttings of, or dig root propagation and stuff like, raspberries you can just dig up, and
Aronia will
or
sucker out
and get some roots and dig those up. So yeah, so what you need to do is if you're thinking in a long time frame, we always think in long time frames, is get some mother plants and get them going, and then once they're ready, start taking your cuttings. So like elderberries, you get a few different varieties to try, and then you take the first year hardwood, just stick it in a pot and keep it from drying out, and they should root for you, and then they'll be ready to plant next season.
But you also got a lot of stuff from the
Yeah, so for like getting mother plants, the conservation nurseries in New Hampshire and New York were a great source. And then we bought stuff, we would buy in stuff to resell to, like some apple trees or plums or things that we hadn't had time yet to grow our own out. So we were buying stuff in. So just we were buying from different wholesale nurseries, and we're also grafting apples and fruit trees and, setting up nurseries for them and letting them grow out. But those will take 3 or 4 years in this climate to get to sellable size.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is. I mean, it is difficult. It's expensive if you have to buy them, but we like to start baby steps. So if you want interested in a plant, just get a mother plant, and then if you like it, start propagating it.
Well, and also just, talking to other people, they might have willows, and you can get willow cuttings and put those on your, wetter areas and things like that. So there might be exchange. Isn't there a good Mafka has that exchange of sign?
Yeah, the seed and sign exchange. Yeah.
Like that, so.
And one other part of this question from someone in the chat was that did you start any plants from seed?
We didn't really.
Can't think of anything.
Well, someone started them from seed at some point.
Yeah, somebody. We didn't do a lot with starting things from seed. I like the propagating, the asexual reproduction.
We made propagation beds, and then would do a lot of our cuttings, and then put those in the fridge in the winter, and then put in spring we'd plant those, and those would, elderberries would do great in that. So if you didn't have a mother tree or a friend you could get elderberry cuttings from. That would be a great way.
I did grow some hazelnuts out, but if you put those in, you have to put a screen over them so the squirrels don't dig them up. So yeah, we did grow out some hazelnut from seed. But there are some great local nurseries here in Maine. So I recommend, if you're not trying to start a farm, to go out and visit these very knowledgeable nursery people, and they'll set you up and get you going.
Amazing. Thank you. And there's another question about the shrubs and small native trees that you were talking about, what your experience with drought tolerance was with different species and which ones were more drought tolerant or if
Right. Yeah, I mean, everything needs a lot of love and attention the first year.
Mhm.
So you don't want the soil to dry out around them, but most of them, except for elderberry wouldn't do well in a real drought unless you
Yeah.
had nice heavy soils for it.
Although what often happens is it really dies back, but it doesn't die. That like an elderberry. That was our sort of experience. We had some really dry summers and they died back, but then the next year they were sprouting up all over the place. So
And we didn't really put in irrigation because we figured, well, we can just do emergency irrigation if we need to. If we have to, lug water out there and use buckets and stuff, if it's a dire situation, we'll do that rather than have all this upfront cost for irrigation and maintenance and, holes and leaks and things like that. And it worked out pretty well. So, our main water issue is to get enough organic matter into the soil because that'll hold water. So if you get good organic matter in your soil and you mulch, then it's going to have to be a really hard drought to really affect these plants, especially after their first year.
and the native plants are actually better at sort of variable conditions too, right?
Yeah,
Versus
in
the
general.
versus fruit trees
Yeah,
that
I
might be
mean,
more susceptible.
a lot of them are like pioneer species, so they can go into disturbed areas naturally and get a foothold. So
Yeah.
they're pretty rugged.
Cool. There's another question about if you had trouble with deer in your berry fields, and I'm assuming that like they were one of the many things that lived on your farm, and so how you interacted with them.
Yeah. So if you remember that one picture we had fencing, 5-foot fencing around our young apple trees. That was a must. That orchard was out back, away from the house, away from our dogs, and so we had to have that there. And the idea being, once the tree height got above the browse level of the deer, then we would take the cages off. And it would be in Europe, you see all these orchards where they graze livestock in there, and there's like a level of foliage where the livestock can't reach anymore, and that's where they get their fruit. So we were kind of going for that model.
But we had some issues like in our elderberry. One year they just kind of went through and seemed like they chomped a lot, but the other years they didn't. And same with like we had some trees and shrubs in the way back, and we couldn't keep the deer out of there, so we ended up having to net, like put some fancy netting around it to try to keep them from browsing. So it depends on where you put things, and how far out they are from the house or from people or activities and things like that, whether you're going to have a lot.
We would encourage hunting too for deer
Yeah.
proximity. But the other thing about these plants is they all have different palatability to deer. So some are more attractive than others, but pretty much all of them will get. Deer like to sample. They'll come by and they'll nip some buds, and usually you can tolerate some of that. It's just going to make it branch a little more. The only one that we grew, it's not really a native, but is the haskap or the honeyberry. Deer will not touch that. You can just put that out in the middle of a deer overwintering yard and they won't eat that. And they say aronia is like that also, but that hasn't been our experience. The deer will chomp.
Black currants they didn't like.
And the black currants they don't like, but that's not a native either.
But the honeyberry is in the honeysuckle family, so maybe that's why, it's not an invasive honeysuckle like the one that we have, but it might have a similar taste.
Deer don't eat that
Because
invasive.
deer don't eat that one either.
Amazing. And in our last few minutes, there's a great comment / just like open question of that it's amazing to restart something after you've kind of had a whole life doing another thing. I mean, they're one and the same, but if you could just share that inspiration to restart, that would be so wonderful, and we would be so grateful for that as an ending.
I'd say we found ourselves in an interesting situation in Vermont. We'd a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that farm. We raised our family there. We were very attached to the land and the animals, and are buried there that we raised, and so that's a big part of us. So leaving that was not easy and not an easy decision, but we also saw where all that work was going, and we were getting older and getting ready to retire. So we wanted a new adventure. We were looking to reinvent ourselves a little bit. And so we came to Maine. Nancy quit her university job.
Long
And that was a
time
big
ago.
that was a
Yeah.
big step because your identity is kind of tied up in what you do. And then coming to Maine, I mean, for me personally, I said, I'm not going to be the same as I was before. I'm not going to do that. But then I found myself falling into the same stuff. If I want to plant this, and now I got to sell stuff. I like selling things. It's like into my blood. But I did become a kayak guide. I got a registered Maine guide for sea kayaking, and I do that. And so I did reinvent myself a little bit. But I think, new things are kind of scary, but also exciting. And you don't want to get stuck in a rut. And we felt like we saw a rut coming in Vermont, where we were doing the same thing over and over again and losing our energy on it. I don't know what you have to
Well,
say.
yeah, I want to butt in. Because I think, one of the things was, the house and that barn, you all saw that was huge, deferred maintenance and all that kind of stuff. That was going to eat up any of our savings or any of our retirement funds and stuff like that. And it was just too big. So that was important to me. But then when we got here, and there was all these invasives that, we kind of in the book, if you pick it up, you'll see we kind of like poo-pooed invasives a little bit, oh yeah, we got to live with them and stuff. And then we came here and it was like the bittersweet and the roses and the knotweed and everything. And for me, that was a little bit of a challenge. Here we kind of spouted off about, living with invasives and how do you deal with them. And then we came to the real deal here. And I felt a challenge in really wanting to kind of get the native species back into this place and really have it robust and not just the bittersweet and everything. So that was I felt a little bit of a personal challenge once we got here and saw the place, and it's kind of a wasteland again, like
Other
we
wasteland.
started.
But on a smaller scale, more
Smaller
manageable.
scale,
But
Different scale.
I think it taught us some humility too, right? Like we're like, oh yeah, we can handle this.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. So,
But the scale matching our energy level. We don't have the same energy we had when we were 35, and could work 120 hours a week if we had to. So, but it's good. It's been great. We love Maine. It's just exciting to meet new people, and we're really happy. We do miss our friends mostly from Vermont. That's the big thing.
Well, there are some people on this call from Waldoboro, Maine, so maybe
Yeah, we have new friends here.
we can
too.
do a meetup in the future. Also, there's someone who wants to know where the cart that you got in the main picture, where you got that from.
The cart, is it the smart cart, the black one? What picture is it? That's a smart cart that they're made here in Maine. Just Google it, smart cart.
There you go. The answer.
Fantastic. They'll last. That one we brought from Vermont. It's like 40 years old.
Oh, that's amazing.
And they're amazing. They come in 7 cubic feet, or I think 12 cubic feet.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Wonderful.
Engineered and made here in Maine.
Even better. Yeah, well, I think that the last kind of question, I know you were talking about the sea kale, but other perennial vegetables that are, maybe if you have 3 that were fun to experiment with.
Well, I think the money makers are rhubarb, asparagus, and sea kale. If you can find the market for sea kale, it's fantastically yielding plant and delicious.
and very pretty too. It's a very pretty plant and attractive to syrphid flies, which the larvae of them are often predators on other types of pests. So they got a lot of good things going for it.
That's amazing. Wow. Well, it is 7:04 and I want to make sure everyone has time to eat dinner if they haven't. And we just want to say thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this information with us tonight. We are going to save the chat. So if we didn't get to some of your questions, we can go through and make sure that all those loops are closed. And this presentation was recorded, so it's going to go up on YouTube. So if you have friends or family members or people that you know that are trying to get into this work, it will be available, and send it around. And yeah, and Nancy and John, thank you so much for such a wonderful evening. And it's just so evident how much of yourselves you put into this place, into this work. And thank you for showing us a vision of what it means to be connected to and stewarding the place where you live. It's a beautiful story. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the
Thank-
opportunity.
thank
That's
you.
really nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been
Wonderful.
fun.
Right.
It's been so fun. I know. It's funny when you can't talk to people in real time, but
I
we
know.
appreciated you made great banter yourselves.
Yeah. And we
Awesome.
didn't argue too much.
It was great. Wonderful. So thank you all so much. And have a great rest of your night.
Okay, bye, Ron.
Bye.
Bye.